I mean, there are a dozen and one protocols there, so-called standards, but every manufacturer has his own.
But there's networking standards, and then there's content control (DRM) standards, which are big problems in themselves. So Microsoft still being quite dominant in that, but still therefore not being available on the iPhone, etc. So that's still to play, and I don't know how that's going to play out.
I'm not sure there's a technical challenge to this. I think it could become a content rights legal. It'll have to be attacked another way, because I think every time one produces a technology solution to it, someone else will find a way of cracking said technology solution.
Yes.
So it becomes a constant battle.
Yes.
And I think you're right. Now that you can view content wherever you want, however you want, it's a problem that may have to be addressed a different way.
I think it's key really to delivering the ultimate consumer experience, and I think moving forward, though, as we say, we're not yet there. There needs to be some form of standardisation, because if you take a look at it from the consumer's point of view, they need to distinguish between content that is free, content that is paid for, and also different devices. For example, one device connects to a backbone, allowing them to download content to only that device. What about the other devices that they have? So I still think that standardisation is the key moving forward, and delivering. We've heard the word seamless, and I think delivering that seamless consumer experience so that DRM happens, content is protected, but it's done in such a way that it doesn't limit the consumer and prevent them from accessing services.
But it's trickier than that. There are those elements, but there is a DRM, and then therefore you've got a billing somewhere in that. Who's going to control that billing and so forth? And again, back to Apple, that's what they've done so well.
Absolutely.
But they're not the only player in the space, and who's going to control the billing and therefore the DRM and therefore the encryption and the chips and so forth. So it's that whole ecosystem that needs to be managed.
I mean, we before we started this conversation, I was explaining how I had bought from iTunes a TV series so that I could watch on a trip. And it was so easy. It really didn't need rocket science to get the content to the iPlayer. Now, I already owned that content. I had bought DVDs of that content. But I knew that actually for me to transfer it from there to convert it to another file, to actually translate it into, it's for me it's not worth the hassle. But if I were an 18-year-old, it probably would be worth the hassle.
As the proud owner of 4 children, the youngest at 19, the oldest at 26, it's the thing that I've spotted the most is the influence of the 10p text message. Nobody misses 10p. And that's why text messages became very powerful. And that's why you get 1,000 text messages with every month. And I think we could be entering a world where you're into the micropayment system, whereby you may have a token, and that token costs you perhaps £1, and that will allow you to move the content a given number of times. And you'll only realise that you've actually spent £30 when you've got to go to your parents and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, look what I've just done.
I need more money." Yeah.
And I think that becomes a self-regulating mechanism, because now you get into a process whereby the transaction mechanisms exist, because I think that billing process is complex. But I think it will be a social behaviour that drives it rather than necessarily a technology one. In terms of independent platforms, it will be, I hope, or I think, I'd be interested in your views on this, it'll be like the mobile platforms. It will become as cutthroat as mobile telephone packages at some point.
Well, I agree, but I also think there's going to be difficulties because how it plays out with the billing platforms. And interestingly enough, it might be one of the mobile billing platforms that actually becomes a ubiquitous competitor to Apple, but it's still to play for. The millions of transactions which take place for mobile platforms and are taken by the mobile billing platforms could well step into this space, but it still needs to step into the whole ecosystem of the content owners, the rights owners, moving through the DRM in the chip and the device and so forth, and hooking those up to start to compete with an experience that you get with on the iPhone.